And now if you'll go up to slideshow, start from beginning or however that.
I'm trying to get there. There we go. All right, we're good to go.
Perfect. All right, it's 12 o'clock on the dot. I'll let folks in and we'll get started.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome, welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with Carepatrol, where education is the heart of everything we do. We're so glad and happy to have you here today, and we're so pleased to welcome a guest presenter, Amy Lam-Ing with the Alabama Head Injury Foundation, and we appreciate all of you for taking time on this beautiful day that God has made to share with us. As many of you may know, we are accredited by the Alabama Board of Social Work, and we're also accredited by the Alabama Board of Nursing to provide 1.0 contact hour for today's presentation from the Alabama Head Injury Foundation, which serves the entire state of Alabama. As you know, or many of you may know, who've been with us in the past, in order to receive credit for today's hour, you must complete our password protected evaluation. And that evaluation password we will give out at the conclusion of the talk today. So you must be present for the hour. And the reason that we do our evaluations in this way is that the Alabama Board of Social Work tells us that if we do this, that this will be considered a live or a classroom hour for those of you in social work. For those of you in nursing and social work, everyone who completes the evaluation today will receive a certificate via email from me. The evaluation closes this evening, so please get it done today if you have time right after or during the workday to do so. And I will read for those of you who are joining us by phone or maybe working at your desk and not able to see the screen or not following the screen. I'll read for you now the evaluation link, which I will also post into the chat room, which I'm doing just as we speak. So the evaluation link today, for those of you who are able to make note of it, and please be ready. Our evaluation link for today is HTTPS colon forward slash www.surveymonkey.com forward slash lowercase r forward slash all uppercase letters and a number K B as in boy, Z as in zoo, Y, H as in Harry, 8, N as in Nancy. That is our evaluation link for today. I have posted it in the chat room for you all. Please make note of it. And thank you again for being here. We want to welcome the program director from the Alabama Head Injury Foundation, Amy Lam-Ing, who will be presenting for us today. And Amy, without continuing to belabor the point, I'll open the floor to you. And just please know, everyone who is on the call, that we do really appreciate and count on your discussion. And I think Amy and I would agree that your observations, your outcomes, your experience is important. And it's important to us and it's important to others on the call. So please do engage with us in the chat room and let us know your thoughts or questions or anything at all. We appreciate you. If you're new to Zoom and you're not familiar with the chat room, take your cursor and move it to the top of your screen or to the bottom, and a bar should appear. On that bar, the words chat. Click that, and you'll open the chat room and be able to engage with us. So, Amy, thank you so much for being here. Please enlighten us on the topic that you've chosen for us today, and let's get started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you for all who are attending. It's such a wonderful afternoon to be able to share information. And again, yes, I encourage you all to share, ask questions. I'm very informal with presenting. We do have quite a bit of information to share, but I hope you all find it beneficial. Just to kind of give you a little information about AHIF, we are a nonprofit. We do cover the entire state of Alabama, and we work with individuals who are recovering from either traumatic brain injury or traumatic spinal cord injury. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on traumatic brain injury and some hopefully helpful information on if you're working with clients or individuals who are in the recovery process from TBI, how to help manage their recovery or maybe some of the behaviors a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and get started. See if we can get it to advance.
You may
There
have,
we
there we go.
There we go. All right, so I always like to define what TBI is because that is the specific subset under acquired brain injury that we as an organization work with. So TBI occurs when there is an external force that can be a jolt, a hit. Sometimes it can be something that penetrates the brain that injures the brain itself. That is what we consider a TBI, basically an external force causing damage. It can be a mild traumatic brain injury, which may create some temporary dysfunction, and that is sometimes what we think about as a concussion, up to a more serious TBI resulting in bruising, torn tissue, bleeding that can result in long-term deficits or complication during the recovery process, or sometimes even death. TBIs can happen to anyone at any time, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic class, age. There is no known cure for TBI. There is only the possibility of prevention. So, attendees, what do you all think the number one cause of TBI is? And please feel free to place it in the chat.
We have head injury,
Accident?
explosions, accidents, wrecks, car wreck, falls, car
Yes.
accidents, stroke.
Lots of great answers. Falls. Falls continues to be the number one cause of injury nationwide, as well as what we record in the state of Alabama. Now, falls disproportionately affect two age groups. They disproportionately affect the elderly population and that toddler age group. So those are the two age groups that we see mostly with falls. Doesn't mean we don't have the guy falling off the ladder, putting up the Christmas lights every now and then, or the deer hunter falling out of the stand. But yes, falls are the number one cause still. Motor vehicle accidents, being struck by something unintentionally. And we are seeing, unfortunately, an increase in the number of traumatic brain injuries due to violence, whether that be an assault with hits to the head. And then we are also seeing, unfortunately, an increase in the number of injuries related to gunshot wounds to the head. So nationwide, through the CDC, about 2.5 million individuals have TBIs. In the state of Alabama, we do have a registry. It is run by the Department of Public Health. So every year we get data on the number of TBIs that are reported in the state. Now, the criteria to make the registry is they have to be admitted to the hospital for a one-night stay, and they have to have the right ICD-10 code at that point of admission to be able to count it in this registry. In 2021, we had about 4,700, close to about 5,000 individuals with newly diagnosed TBI in the state of Alabama that was significant enough for them to be hospitalized. But I want you to think about that's not capturing the TBIs that maybe start as a concussion, maybe it's happening on that sports field and doesn't get the attention right away. And it could be those that never find their way to a hospital. For instance, we know that there is a significant amount of brain injury occurring within the intimate partner violence population. Unfortunately, a lot of those individuals never make it to the hospital and never report it. So while we are extremely thankful for the numbers that we do have, it is a starting point. So how does a TBI affect the survivor? Immediately after experiencing a blow to the head, you might have a period of altered mental status. There might be a brief loss of consciousness. Sometimes there isn't, though. There may be headaches, dizziness. You may have slowed process of information, fatigue, sensitivity to light and noise, forgetfulness. Kind of what we used to refer to as that punch drunk state, that post concussiveness, where it's just things aren't quite coming together like they should. Now, this would be for someone who is experiencing somewhere between a mild to a moderate type of TBI. If we are talking about someone who's experiencing more of a severe TBI, then we would be looking more talking about the Glasgow Coma Scale scores as to what their level of consciousness, their level of responsiveness is. Something to keep in mind when we do talk about brain injury is it is cumulative. So when we talk about someone who reports, I have had multiple concussions, each concussion can kind of compound on itself. So the more concussions that someone reports having, the more deficits, the more impairments, the more difficulty with the recovery process that we may see. And repeated brain injury can lead to physical, emotional, and cognitive dysfunction over time. I'm going to pause for just a moment and see if there are any questions regarding the little brief synopsis of TBI before I continue. Anyone surprised by the causes? And again, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay. So let's talk about some possible changes after traumatic brain injury. TBIs, depending on the level of TBI, and we do talk about it in terms of a mild TBI, which would be something like a concussion, to a moderate to a severe TBI, we can have different levels of either temporary or permanent cognitive, physical, behavioral, and emotional changes related to that. And it can take people different amounts of time for recovery. No two brain injuries are alike, and no two recoveries are alike. So some of the most common physical deficits that we see, the number one that we hear about is persistent complaints of headache and fatigue. We serve clients newly injured. We serve clients multiple years removed from injury. And across that gambit of individuals that we serve, even those that are 10 or 20 years removed from injury still complain about headaches and still complain about never quite getting their energy level back, having that fatigue, needing to take a nap or downtime before they have something major planned. Some of the decreased motor skills we may see are poor control of movements, difficulty walking, slurred speech, and weakness. And sometimes that can be in a specific limb or specific side of the body, depending on where that TBI has occurred. Dizziness and balance issues are a complaint that we hear quite often. Decreases in senses like hearing, vision, or sense of smell. And of course, increased sensitivity to light and noise, which will play a role in some of the behavioral changes that we'll see later. So some possible behavioral and social changes, the most common that we hear about or that are reported to us is depression and anxiety after TBI. Sometimes that is due to some of the actual damage or chemical changes going on during the brain during the recovery process. And sometimes that is due to accepting some of the limitations they are now having after a TBI. We also see difficulty with self-regulation, increased impulsivity, which can lead to, unfortunately, to increased risk-taking, which can then lead to, unfortunately, a second occurrence or even a third occurrence of a TBI. It is not uncommon, and it is actually an increased risk that once you have your first TBI, to have your second or third TBI. Irritability and agitation, inability sometimes to get along with others, low tolerance for stress or stressful environments is one that we hear a lot from not only our clients, but the caregivers and families that are supporting them. And then, of course, sometimes diminished insight or diminished reasoning and judgment can go along with that. Some cognitive linguistic deficits, short-term and long-term memory loss. And I see in the chat room someone has put that they have a friend that's having short-term memory issues due to a TBI. That is probably behind the report of social isolation. Short-term memory is probably the second or third problem that we hear reported quite often. Impaired judgment, trouble concentrating or paying attention, difficulty planning and setting goals, difficulty with problem solving. Then you get to your auditory comprehension deficits that could be language related, slow processing of information, maybe trouble reading, trouble understanding what is being said to them or following directions. And then, of course, more into your verbal expression issues, your trouble putting thoughts into words, possibly even some aphasias after TBI. So, as we know, when it comes to the brain, if we know the areas of the brains that have been affected or have had damage, we have a pretty good idea of what deficits we might be able to predict after injury. And because we know different parts of the brain can control different types of responses. So question to the group, and please feel free to put it in the chat. Which lobe of the brain do you think is the one that is most frequently injured in TBI? I'm seeing all the right answers. Yes, the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the one that is most typically injured. One reason is we have the coup contra coup type of injury, which is the coup is the initial injury, the initial insult to the brain. The coup is the injury that occurs once that brain shifts, once it reacts to being hit, bouncing, and hitting on the other side. And a lot of times, if we're talking about a fall, if we're talking about a motor vehicle accident, we're talking about a frontal to back type of injury. So even though the initial insult may not have happened to the front of the head, that coup injury may be frontal, but absolutely. The frontal lobe is the one that we see the most injury in related to TBI. And it's the one that we see problems with attention, reasoning, emotional and social behavioral changes, which we typically think of when we think of someone with a traumatic brain injury. So let's talk about working with individuals with TBI. And again, in the chat, how many of you are actively working with clients with traumatic brain injury on, I'd say, either a daily to monthly basis? Just a yes would be fine. Good. Yeah, a lot of them. Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the common concerns that we hear. Some of these slides you're going to see are probably written more towards working presentation for family working with one of their survivors, but all of this information can definitely be applied to someone who is working with an individual or a client in a professional setting. So agitation and restlessness after TBI, this is one that we hear a lot from either service providers or families. They can be problematic behaviors because if you can't get someone to attend, if you can't get someone to settle, it's very hard to get them to participate in the activities that they need to for the recovery process. So some of the suggestions for that is minimizing the amount of stimuli in the environment, looking for ways to reduce light, noise, smells, crowds. I am a speech therapist by background, have been a practicing speech therapist for about 22 years now. Worked in many, many hospital settings, working specifically with the adult population of neuro. So a lot of traumatic brain injury clients have come through my office. What I would typically do is I would find ways in my office to lower the lights if possible. Sometimes that would be just lamp lighting, because the overhead lights sometimes could be quite harsh if they had sensitivity to it. If I had a table, I would make sure that my table was clear, except for the only activity or paperwork I wanted that individual to focus on. So I was changing the environment to meet the need of the client. When speaking in a slow and calming manner, that automatically triggers them to try to meet you at that level of slow, calm speaking. Try to redirect or change the topic if they find themselves distracted. So sometimes it does take a lot of redirection, a lot of trying to move them back onto task. And then agitation can be due to an individual feeling they're forced to do something, that they don't have a choice in it. So when possible, we try to give them choices to honor their preference. For example, we do facilitate in-person support groups across the state. We have an individual that comes to a support group who I would say restlessness is one of his main behaviors that is extremely noticeable. He likes to pace, he likes to be up, and he likes to be moving. If we are doing an activity as a group, that can be very distracting to the group. If you have someone who's constantly up, down, moving when they're supposed to be seated. We have changed how the group looks to help better accommodate him. Initially, we're slowly working on getting him to be able to sit for an extended period of time. But we've given him tasks where he has a purpose for getting up and moving now versus just doing it out of restlessness. So he now hands out all of our activities to the people as they're seated. So he gets to get up and move around and do that. If we have an activity that is more of like a card game or something where most people are sitting at the table or even playing bingo, we put his in the middle of the room on a small table where he can then get up when it's his turn and perform his task at a table. But again, we're meeting his need by giving him a purpose and a reason to get up and move, and not forcing him to sit still for 45 minutes to an hour. And we have seen a significant decrease to his agitation and him not saying after about 15 minutes, I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to go home. So more behavior changes, inappropriate, embarrassing behavior. Unfortunately, sometimes with diminished reasoning, impulsivity, that decrease in a filter. We do have clients that can say some inappropriate things. They will tell strangers about their personal matters. They may ask you very personal questions, make embarrassing sexual comments or gestures. And sometimes they tend to choose cuss words to express themselves quite frequently. Some things to do with that. Calmly letting that person know that the behavior is not appropriate is important. And it's important to do that at that moment in time. And that has to do a lot with memory. If we have a client who is saying inappropriate things or touching inappropriately, me waiting and taking him aside maybe 10, 15 minutes later and addressing it probably isn't going to be as effective as me addressing it right there in the moment, because 10 or 15 minutes from now, he may not remember the behavior that he was doing. Sometimes coming up with a signal to let your person know that, hey, it's time to stop. That's not appropriate behavior. Once you get comfortable with establishing what is appropriate and isn't appropriate. Setting up a reward system so that if they do go out in the community and they have an excellent outing, let's make sure that we are praising them and rewarding them for that. And if your loved one is acting inappropriately, like we talked about, stopping and addressing it immediately. That is probably the biggest takeaway from this. Impulsivity. Saying or doing whatever comes to mind without any thinking of consequences. This can unfortunately lead to some very dangerous action, walking into streets without looking. We have had clients who have tried to exit the vehicle before it has fully stopped, impulsively, just so excited to be at the destination where they were. So definitely we have to stop them when they are acting without thinking, talking to them very calmly about what the consequences might be. Again, possibly developing a social signal if it's a client that you work with on a regular basis. I used to work in group homes and we would take our clients into the community for community outings. So we had that kind of a relationship where I had a young man who, if we were in a store that was playing music, that fun music, if it was a song that he liked, and for some reason he preferred hits of the 80s, he would stop in the middle of the grocery store or wherever we were and sing to that music at the top of his lungs, which can be a bit jarring for those around him who aren't expecting that. So we developed a little signal of like, no, not right now. We'll sing in the car. And then, of course, if you need to, looking at removing items from where they are that could be dangerous. That can include, if you're in your office, maybe making sure the scissors aren't out on the desk, any type of car keys, any kind of sharp object that you feel that impulsively they could use to harm themselves or others. Anger and temper tantrums. This is one we hear a lot from families and caregivers, that their loved one is becoming more angry, more frustrated, sometimes even showing physical aggression at times. Part of that is understanding being more irritable, being more angry can be due to that brain injury. And we work very closely with the caregivers to try to get them to understand not to take that behavior personally. It is not a personal attack. It is the fact that your loved one is maybe not processing the environment as well. Maybe this irritability and anger is their way of communicating to you something isn't right, and finding out the way to better address that, or how do we modify that. So we ask them to, when possible, if it's happening, if there's yelling, cursing, things like that, ignore it if possible. Giving too much attention to it can make the behavior worse. Set rules for communication with them. Let them know that when it's upset, it's okay. Maybe you find some select words, or this is how you're going to communicate to me that you're upset, that you're frustrated right now. But let them know that it's best to do that in a calm way. But if they do get to the point where they are unable to calm themselves, if they're unable to self-regulate, don't engage with them. Walk away, let them know that you will be back after they are calmer. Now, I always like to throw in there, if at any point in time, what we tell our caregivers is, if at any point in time you yourself feel in danger, or you think that your loved one is possibly a danger to themselves, then of course, reach out to the proper authorities. Because we do not want our caregivers or our clients to ever be harmed. There's a fine line between being able to walk away and then feeling absolutely scared. But you're absolutely right. It is difficult to share this with families and get families to understand that there are boundaries that have to be set, and there are ways that we have to manage this behavior. Because more than likely, this is not the temperament of their loved one pre-brain injury. And that's a very hard thing to accept. A lot of tearful conversations. Depression and lack of motivation. Depression is something that we get reported a lot from our clients. I'm going to talk about it in framing of the clients right now, but I want us to also think about depression and the caregivers and the families that are supporting that person, because that is something that we need to consider as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you may see it as sits in front of the TV all day, doesn't want to get up and get started or get anything done, sad all the time, not interested, doesn't do the things they used to enjoy, sleeping too much, or just difficulty with sleeping. Maybe our sleeping is completely erratic now. Understand that depression, these are all signs that maybe your loved one is starting to face a little bit of the reality of the deficits they currently have or having to live with. That is not a bad thing. It's making sure that we then address that depression and seek help on behalf of that client. That could be talking with a doctor about possible medication or a depression assessment. Talking with them about their feelings, seeing where we need to go next, getting them involved in support groups, maybe talking with others who are facing some of the same challenges during recovery they are could be beneficial. And then, of course, seeking professional intervention, whether that be through counseling, in order to address this depression, because one thing we want to make sure that our clients continue to stay motivated so that they continue on their recovery journey. And then loss of memory after TBI. TBI, we do see the majority of memory deficits in short-term memory. Typically, long-term memory is more readily preserved. TBI can affect parts of the brain that are responsible for learning and remembering. The kind of rule of thumb is if you have someone that has very poor attention, you're going to have issues with memory. Because if you can't attend to a task, you can't remember a task. And people with TBI it's not uncommon for them not to remember the incident or the accident that caused the injury. And sometimes they can very much get hung up on the fact that they don't remember this happening to them, and just guiding them through the process of, that's okay that you don't remember that. Let's focus on what we're doing now. So memory strategies, again, keeping distractions to a minimum, just like we talked about with the attention tasks. Focusing on one task at a time instead of trying to lay out multiple activities for them. Repetition is always a good memory strategy. Writing things down is a good memory strategy, especially appointments, phone messages, helping them make lists that they can then actively check mark off. When you are providing them with information that you need them to retain, making sure you speak slowly, making sure that you repeat yourself to highlight the important aspects that need to be remembered. Keeping routines is very important for a lot of our clients. if they get off of their routine, sometimes that's when we see frustration. That's when we see kind of they get discombobulated. Keeping items in the same place so they don't have to search or look for them. And we call them memory stations, that if you have items that your loved one needs, that they need access to, making sure that you have them all in one place. Sometimes that's by a door as you're leaving the house, so they can easily pick up what they need before they leave, and everything gets returned to that memory station when they enter the house. Using alarms, calendars, notepads to help stay on task. And then technology. Technology has been wonderful. Tablets, cell phones, being able to set reminders, using Alexa or Dot to set a reminder, that they can verbally cue that client or that individual as to what they need to remember to do. So when we talk about working with individuals, some of the main takeaways are no two brain injuries are ever the same, and therefore the recovery of a brain injury is going to be unique as well. There are going to be some clients that we see that we think, oh my goodness, they're going to be back to work and doing what they were doing before very quickly. And there are going to be some who we think, gosh, they're probably not going to be as successful. We've had a lot of clients surprise us over the years, and we've learned to kind of not make those predictions anymore because you don't know what each individual is capable of. Remember to see the person as a whole and not just an injury. There's more going on with them than just the TBI, and we aren't always aware of it because sometimes we become hyper-focused on our aspect of treatment that we forget to think about what's going on in the home. What does support look like in the home? Has the caregiver changed? Are there dynamics within that we're not aware of, or we're not asking the right questions about, that might be affecting their want to participate or ability to participate? Modify to meet the need of the client. You probably heard me say it more than 3 or 4 times. We control the environment, we control this, but we need to do it to meet the expectation of the client. We need to meet that client at what their level is. I was having a conversation with a therapy friend of mine the other day who does home health, and she was talking about a TBI client that she's serving who needs help with cognition, and she's going in with workbooks, trying to get him to sit down and do workbooks. And he's a younger man in his 20s. She's like, my gosh, all he wants to do is play video games all day. I can't get him to do my workbooks. Well, you know what? Whip out an iPad. Is there a game on the iPad that's going to be engaging for him? Obviously, he's of the generation that doesn't do workbooks like some of our older people are. Maybe meeting him at what his likes are, as what his needs are. He may be more engaged, and that might open the door to, we played this video game for 5 to 10 minutes. Let's do a worksheet now before we go back to the next game. Anticipate and recognize needs and utilize resources. And that's going to take us into our next few slides about who we are as an organization and how to utilize us as a resource. But I do want to pause and see if there are any questions at this point in time. Okay, let's talk about, oh, I'm so sorry. Is this a free resource for clients? What I'm going to be talking about, Alabama Head Injury Foundation, yes. We are a free resource as a nonprofit. Any of the services I'm going to talk about are absolutely free of charge. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that you all are liking the information. Yes, and I love memory stations too. Even though no one in my family has a TBI, we used memory stations for my kids when they were younger, getting ready for school in the morning, because their brains aren't developed yet, so they get a little forgetful. So This is who we are. We are the Alabama Head Injury Foundation. We are a nonprofit. We have been around since 1984. And like I said previously, we specifically work with individuals across the state of Alabama who are in the recovery process from either traumatic brain injury or traumatic spinal cord injury. For us, there is no limit on age. We can work with, we just did an intake last week on a 1-year-old child who was injured in a motor vehicle accident, all the way up to, the geriatric population. We don't have any requirements for age. We do not have any requirements for when the injury occurred. We can open a case and start working with you on a newly injured individual, or if someone is multiple years removed and is now seeking services or has had a life-changing event. We get that a lot. If a caregiver passes, then they can come back and we can work with them. So once we open a case with an individual, they can stay with our organization for as long as they want. There is no time limit. So a lot of our clients have been with us for multiple years. And sometimes they choose to step away from us. They don't need our services. But again, they can always come back and start fresh. So the main service we provide is supports, resource coordination. As you see our state broken up into 3 areas, North, Central, and South Alabama, we have support specialists in each area. We have a new client support specialist, and that role is to work mainly with new clients coming on board. There are ones who are working directly with hospitals to help transition clients from hospitals to home, get them as stable as possible, help them find what resources in the community or through the state they may qualify for. Once they get them, as we call it, stable as possible, they can be transitioned to our long-term support specialist, who will then stay with them throughout their time with our organization. That's usually check-in calls with them about every 6 months to see if there's any new needs and offering them new programs or resources as we find them or as they become available. Switch over. Some of our direct programming that we offer is our caregiver support programs. We have caregiver support groups both online and in person. Our online support groups meet Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock. We also have additional programs that are, those support groups are usually about an hour long. We have a support group facilitator that plans the curriculum, and she facilitates the support groups. We also have what we call a Mindfulness Monday, which is a 30-minute check-in on Mondays that they can Zoom into, led by one of our mental health counselors, that just helps them start off the week, maybe with some breathing exercises, maybe some mindfulness activities to get in the right frame of mind on a Monday morning. We also offer chair yoga online that they can Zoom into as well, and those are on Tuesdays. So those are our online offerings, and then once a month in 5 parts of the state, we offer in-person support groups for those individuals that want that social interaction and connection, to meet with people with same lived experience. And they are also facilitated by our support specialists in that area. Currently, our in-person support groups are happening in Mobile, Dothan, Roanoke, Gadsden, and the Birmingham area. We have recreational camps that we put on 3 times a year. Last month, we just did our weekend camp at Camp Aska. That is a time where we get to take about 18 to 20 of our clients. They bring one caregiver with them, and they get to just have that wonderful camp experience at no cost to them. We do the weekend camp at Camp Aska in March. We will do a week-long camp at Camp Aska in August. And then we do our fall retreat at Camp McDowell in Nauvoo, Alabama in the fall of the year. So 3 opportunities across the state for them to come enjoy recreational camp It's a wonderful experience. And then we have our Bright Ideas TBI camp. The clients that we serve that find their way to us, a lot of them are either underinsured or uninsured. So they have not had access to a lot of therapeutic interventions after they leave the acute care hospital. So our Bright Ideas Camp is designed for either those individuals who have not had access or clients who are multiple years removed who are having declines. We partner with universities across the state of Alabama. We work directly with their graduate level students in speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, social work, nursing, diet and nutrition, and I'm sure I'm leaving some of the other disciplines out. We bring our clients to the campus for 3 days. And for 3 days, we let the graduate level students provide assessments, home exercise plans for them, and they get to just really try out some different techniques with the clients. The goal is improved health and wellness for our clients and caregivers. So at the end of those 3 days, they have a plan in place of what they could be doing at home over the next few months to continue progress. And then our last main one is mental health counseling. We have 2 full-time mental health counselors. And then we have 3 additional staff who do it part-time. Our mental health counseling is open to our clients, caregivers, and family members that are in the home with the client, 14 years of age and up. And again, it's all free. Don't want to leave out the caregivers. We've put a big focus on them in the past couple of years. We do have a caregiver peer-to-peer support group. It meets twice a month on Zoom. We have a caregiver support specialist. Her only role within our organization is to provide education and support and check-ins with the caregiver to make sure their needs are being met as they meet the needs of the clients. We have a caregiver support series. So we bring in individuals kind of like this to provide information to caregivers. We ask them what topics they want to hear about. We try to find that speaker. In the past, we've had neuropsychologists come in and talk. We've had lawyers come in and talk about estate planning. You name it, we'll find that resource. We provide respite vouchers for clients who are the 24-hour caregiver for their loved one. We do a $1,500 voucher for a family for a year, and we help partner them with a home health agency so that they can use those respite hours as needed. And then our newest offering for caregivers is we do a caregiver book club every summer. So if they sign up for the book club, we send them the book through the mail. They meet on Zoom, talk about what chapters to read, and they meet back about once a month for some discussion and sharing about the book. And of course, that also leads into some discussion and sharing about what their experience is as a caregiver. So all of the information that I have shared with you is available on our website for free at www.ahif.org. If you go, and this, unfortunately, the slide came out quite blurry. If you go under our resources tab, there are downloadable handouts front and back about specific topics. There's some that are specific to what is traumatic brain injury. Some of them are about loss of memory. Some of them are about lack of awareness, and others about the topics that we discussed today. So the information I shared in this is also available online. And then if you are working with clients for traumatic brain injury or traumatic spinal cord injury, and you feel they would benefit from just being connected with us, you can make a referral to us. We do have a referral form that we can send you, or you can, I'll put my email in the chat. You are free to email me and I will send you one of our forms. So, any questions?
Well, I don't think there are any questions so far, but I want to thank you so much for not only for the information today, but for the work that you do and for the work that your colleagues do. Oh, here's the question. Is there any specific info you were looking for on a referral?
So the referral form, we ask for the client's name. We ask for what the injury is. Is it a TBI, a spinal cord, or is it both? We ask, I should have said in the beginning, because we are a nonprofit, we do not require verification of the medical diagnosis. It can be self-report for us. We sometimes ask, how did you know this person has a TBI? Because if we do try to get them connected with maybe state services, we will need that information. Really, besides that, some contact, either a phone number or an email. And if you could tell me the county of residence, that just makes my job a little bit easier.
And there was a question from I forget from whom, but the question was Roanoke is an interesting area for which to have these services. Is there a higher number of patients in that area?
We have what we call our hotspots, and Roanoke happens to be a hotspot for some reason. And I don't know if it's just the fact that our long-term support specialist that works that area has been with us for 22 years, that over her 22 years, she has just developed great relationships and make sure that everybody with a TBI gets sent her way, or if there's something specific about that area. But yeah, we do have quite a few in the Roanoke area. Gadsden is another hotspot, and we're seeing an increase in the Jasper Walker County area as well. Because you usually think of it typically as your metro areas, your Birminghams, your Montgomery, your Huntsville. But we do serve rural areas, we do serve rural counties, and yeah, we see in the rural areas as well.
And would you mind sharing these slides with me so that I can share them with our folks who complete our evaluation? And as to the
Absolutely.
evaluation, for those of you that may have joined us after we began, the link for today is https:// www.surveymonkey.com / lowercase r / all uppercase letters K B as in boy, Z as in zoo, Y H 8 N as in Nancy. And our password for today, I'm posting now in the chat room, is all caps AHIF as in Alabama Head Injury Foundation. Our password is all caps AHIF as in Alabama Head Injury Foundation. And I'm so grateful to a former participant in one of our series for suggesting this topic and for suggesting you, Amy. I think it's been great information. I know that our folks appreciate it and appreciate you and the work that you do. For those of you looking for our next CEU, we will be joining you again on May 6th. And at that point, we'll be discussing ageism in healthcare and ethics unit. So look for our calendar to come out soon for May. We hope to have many other good presenters, including myself. Not to say I'm a good presenter, but other good presenters like Miss Ng to join us. And we thank each of you for being with us today, for investing in yourself and for investing in your clients and getting this information so that it may be actionable for you. If there are no other questions, we will call it an end of today. But thank you again so much, Amy. I really appreciate everything that you shared with us and everything that you do. And I know that our folks online and Miss Hunter will tell you here, thank you. And you've been a great presenter, she says. So I would second that. And I thank you for everything.
Well, thank you all so much for having me, and I hope to hear from some of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.